I'd like you to welcome Dr. Helen Pringle.
Actually, I'd probably change the title to Laughing as Cruelty now, but anyway, this after I've made a few comments here. First of all, of course, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land who have survived, particularly the women who survived an amazing and horrible history of sexual violence right from the beginning of colonisation of Australia. I do work here in the University of New South Wales, but I'm also part of a global network of researchers on pornography and prostitution, as well, in particular with some amazing women and some amazing men. Two that I'd like to mention in particular, Maddie Coy in London, at London Met University, and Megan Tyler in Victoria. I just put in a quick plug. We have a network called the Nordic Model Information Network, which is about prostitution. I also mention this for two reasons. One, we're not alone. Sometimes when you're opposed to pornography, opposed to prostitution, you can feel it's a very lonely and even persecuted, I speak from experience, position to be in. You're not alone. The second thing is the people that I work with and myself take a radical approach. We're for abolition, not for amelioration of either prostitution or pornography. One reservation which I'd give you is that my expertise is not in empirical studies. I don't do interviews with people. I do gather information in that way, but my chief interest, as in the introduction should show, is in frameworks and contexts of understanding, ways of understanding. However, I'm going to ask you to begin with an experiment, a thought experiment. I won't prolong it. For one reason, I'm already fairly sure what the outcome of it is. I've done it before, and the results are fairly uniform in that way. I've done it on myself. The experiment consists in asking you to picture pornography. We often think and reason by means of mental pictures or images, much more even than I think than by words and arguments. The mental pictures that we have of things are really important in terms of being a reflection of how we think about things, but they also in turn shape how we think about those matters. So here what I'm asking you is, when I say pornography, what image comes into your mind? What mental image comes into your mind? The picture that comes to most people is of an object of pornography. In other words, people often think of something that is pornographic, that they would classify as pornographic. For people of my age, we often think of the cover of a magazine like Playboy or Hustler, even though these days, of course, magazines are a very small part of the pornography industry. Growing smaller, I'd say. But if I were to reword the question slightly differently and ask you, what image comes to your mind when I say using pornography? What image do you get in your mind of that? So here, instead of asking you to identify examples of pornographic objects, what the revised question is getting is how do we think people do pornography? I don't think that people simply use pornography. In fact, I sometimes think that pornography uses us more than we use it. But I'm interested in my research in how children and adults become part of pornography in doing it. They become part of a pornography system, in other words. And I'll explain a little bit more about what I mean by that in a bit. So it's something more than just using or consuming pornography. And I don't know a very elegant way to put it. I don't think there is any very elegant way to put it. In my research, I look at how people in their lives are pornographised, pornographicated, something like that, through their use of porn objects. As I say, there's no real way I can put it. In other words, what I'm interested in is pornography not as a collection of objects, magazines or videos, but pornography as a practice, in other words. That's not quite how we usually understand pornography at all when we talk about it in public forums like this, or in Parliament, or in the courts. Academics, we talk about things differently. But I think our first impulse in reaction to my thought experiment question is to identify examples of objects that we understand as pornographic in our mental pictures. But if we think about how people do pornography in using it, I would say the most common image we have, and I include myself here, is of a solitary young person. A solitary young man, to be exact. I'm talking about mental images here, not about the empirical reality. A solitary young man by himself in a darkened room beside a flickering screen. Just to give you an example here, if you search on Google Images using a term like viewing pornography, that's the sort of thing that will come up. Solitary people watching a screen, in that way, often darkened screen. The one second from the right at the top is, I think, very typical of how we do it. Another search term, watching pornography. I want to talk about the bottom ones in a second, but again, they're sort of a fairly, that's the picture that you get. This is the mental picture that we get, and it's the picture that is portrayed on Google that comes up more often. But I want to add to that mental picture a little, and I won't show you the results of these other search terms that you could use. Masturbating to pornography, you can already see an example of it there. Or if you sort of think, well, maybe if you put in the plural, boys watching pornography, you get a slightly different outcome, but in fact you don't. You get these solitary figures sitting in a darkened room in that way. I won't show you the results of those other search terms. It's enough to say that the Google results that you get, even on these terms, very simple terms. I'm not looking for pornography, I'm looking for people watching pornography. Even the results that you get on here indicate that it's not at all difficult to find a whole range of pornography, soft through hard pornography. I've only looked for images here, I haven't looked for videos, but you know about GIFs now and so forth, so you often get videos coming up on them anyway in that way. You don't have to journey into what people call the dark web, rather intriguingly. Another source that we have, apart from our own search terms on people's pornographic practices, are court cases to do with downloading, possession and use of pornography, particularly child pornography. We don't use that evidence enough about cases. I've had people from the Scarlet Alliance, for example, tell me that it's very hard to find child pornography. And they ask me, how do I know how people find it? I say, well, I've read court cases where people tell you how they find it. I've read court cases where a student, an engineering student from University of New South Wales, who was prosecuted for child pornography, told us how he found it and what he found in that way. It's not that hard to find in that way. So it's all these ways that we have of understanding not only what people find, but how they find it and what they do here. So to stress here, just to sum up this first part, I think that clearly the most common way we understand how pornography is used or done is as this solitary character in privacy, often a furtive privacy, but the fellow third from the bottom there, as if he's always expecting his mother, usually, in the case of that pickup artist, to walk in on him with his pants down in this way. I'm not denying that these are very common ways of doing pornography, of using it, but it's a misleading picture in a couple of ways. First, in terms of understanding, this picture kind of imprisons us. It imprisons us in a way of thinking about pornography as an interaction between a man, one boy, sometimes a girl. Girls don't come up on these images very much. It imprisons us in a way of thinking about pornography as an interaction between that one person and an image. That's something that's not real life, but it's fantasy in some sense. These are pictures of real life as far as I know. The mental picture that we have, this frequent mental picture, blocks out the pornography industry, the way that porn objects are made, and the terrible toll that the making of them takes on the bodies and souls of some women in particular. This is not really central, this question of the pornography industry is not really central to the topic of this symposium, but so I'm not going to talk about it more. I recommend you to Pornland, Gail Dines' book, but I'd ask you not to forget how pornography is made in the first place. When we use it, we block that out of our mind completely. If we remember how it was made also, we can think about questions of freedom of speech quite differently, which is an area that I have expertise in, not just as the freedom of an individual to read or watch what he pleases. More to the point of this symposium though, the point that I want to make here is that it's not empirically accurate to talk about pornography as being individually consumed, as in this mental picture that we have. I want to give you an example here of what I mean by pornography as a collective rather than an individual practice. In my research, I've always viewed pornography as a social practice. In other words, even though it may be done in some cases by individual boys in their individual bedrooms, they react in remarkably similar ways to what they see and to what they view. People do pornography according to a script. There's nothing spontaneous about it. There's nothing fresh or new or daring, as the person in the video this morning said. It's all been done and it's all fairly a tape loop. People do pornography according to a script, and those who watch it are not transgressing norms, social norms. They're conforming to a script. Even defenders of pornography, I think, sense this when they call pornography a rite of initiation or rite of passage. In a book that I analysed in Big Porn Inc. called The Porn Report, the authors tell familiar stories of their first encounter with pornography. They're always pretty much the same, because they're formulaic in that way. One of the authors of the book, The Porn Report, told how he found a copy of Playboy in the woods near his house, but proceeded to leaf through it in the furtiveness of his own company. But apart from that social scripting, in other words, the social scripting of how people react to pornography, of finding and doing it and so forth, the consumption of pornography has also become a much more collective practice than it was in the past, or anyway, the past that we know about. I suspect that there's some more history there to be told. I'm going to use the example here of a notorious video called, called Two Girls and One Cup, or Two Girls, One Cup. It's actually a trailer for a Brazilian film called Hungry Bitches, very respectful title, which was made and posted online in 2007. It has a distinctive soundtrack as well, which you'll hear a little of in a moment. After the trailer was posted, it became a viral practice to play it for a group of people in order to video their reactions to it. And the reaction video then was posted online. So here you see a selection, this is just the first page of Google search, of Two Girls, One Cup video reaction. There's the best one, and then there's a series of other ones. There's a number of things we could say about this search that I've done here, this search I've done many times, of course. First, there are 1.8 million videos on this search term. Some of those are remakes or parodies of the original trailer. I haven't actually watched them all, I'm sorry to say. I think my life is too short and too valuable to do that. Secondly, they have large numbers of views. There's 25 million views in one case. This is not of the trailer, this is of the reaction videos. Or in the case of as you can see, the Marines, which are second from the bottom on the left there, there's 10 million views of that. These are view counts for the videos of the reactions, not views of the original trailer. It's also very disturbing to me the age of the people who have posted these reaction videos. I have seen reaction videos posted by 5-year-old children. You can see the kid up there. Kid watches Two Girls, One Cup in that way, and that kid is 6, I think, in that video. Others of you tell their age. Some of them, I think, are a little younger than they say they are in that way. People put up, there's this last one, my whole family watched it. People have this strange practice, which I don't quite understand. They put up their friends, or sort of rig their friends to do a reaction video. I don't know, with friends like that, you really don't need anybody else around for enemies. I'm not sure how popular this practice was of reaction videos before the posting of this particular trailer, but at any rate, it's a really new phenomenon in the consumption of pornography. The process of videoing yourself watching pornography and then posting that video on YouTube or other services. It really wasn't technologically possible, at least as a kind of widespread or democratic process to do this until maybe 10 years ago with YouTube and technological expertise in video making. It's a way in which the collective habits, practices and lives of people are now moulded and formed by pornography from a very early age, a disturbingly early age. I say disturbing because I think of myself as an unshockable person. I've been doing research in this area for far too long to be easily shocked, but I find these videos of the reactions of very young children shocking. In particular, what I wanted to focus on for the rest of my talk is I find their laughter shocking. If you look at the top there, I'll show you a close-up. Here's the best Two Girls, I don't know if it's the best one. I think it's got about 6 million views, this one here. But you can see, extremely funny. The selling point of these videos is that they're funny. And they're funny on a variety of levels. What happens is that when people watch this video, they laugh. They laugh uproariously. They do other things as well, but fundamentally, if you watch one of the videos, over the top of the soundtrack of the trailer, you'll hear this soundtrack of laughter. So you have this kind of constant soundtrack of laughter to pornography. I find this laughter shocking. I find people's failure to be shocked or disturbed or worried, concerned by what they see, and instead laughing as extremely concerning. In the reaction videos, people laugh at the trailer, but they also laugh at themselves. They also laugh at themselves, at their own reactions. They're laughing at themselves, at their own reactions, and thinking and laughing as if they didn't deserve to have the reactions that they did, which are often of shock in that way. This script, again, this is a script. The script for reaction videos is very clear cut. It's not cool to be serious. It's not cool to stay serious. It's not cool to express concern. It's not cool rather to express that you're shocked or in any other way disturbed by these. You must laugh at yourself and at others for any residual sense of shock or disturbance you have. So the scripted reaction to pornography here is laughter. This is an example, and I won't play it because I don't have time, I'm sorry, I was going to, but if it's an example of a reaction video. There's nothing spontaneous about it. The girls who do this realise that they're doing it, they realise that they're taking part in a ritual. At one point they say, we wanted to video ourselves like everyone else does. And they go on laughing until the end. One of their friends walks in who also laughs. They know very well what's in the video that they're going to do, and their own reaction is pretty much the same as every other 1.8 million viewers of these reaction videos. They even issue a warning at the end for others not to watch the trailer, all interspersed with laughter. Far from being an individual pursuit, this practice is a rehearsal of consuming porn objects that is repeated over and over again with very little variation. There's nothing individual or even spontaneous about this. So I want to draw some things together from this short talk by stressing this laughter here. There's a soundtrack of music to this trailer. The music has some notoriety of its own. There's also this added soundtrack of laughter to the reaction videos. What does that laughter signify, and why should it matter to us? What concern it is? Let me say a couple of things. I find that when I write or speak about pornography, often the most common thing that people who are not academics say that they're looking for is a definition. They say, well, how do you define pornography? And of course I'm not interested in that, so I say, well, I'm interested in how people use it, not how you define it in that way. The question that they're asking for is, I think that the question that they're looking for, or the answer that they're looking for is actually probably pretty much that. They're looking for a fight or an argument. They're not really looking for an answer in that way. The question means I disagree with your perspective and I think it's wrong. But I think the question is quite easy in a sense because it has a fairly conventional answer, which is that pornography is the explicit portrayal of sexual subject matter for the purpose of sexual arousal, or for the purpose of sexual arousal and erotic satisfaction. This gives us a sense of what is in pornography as well as what its purpose is. And I think you'd find a widespread consensus, who would argue with the fact that pornography is about erotic arousal, that this is what marks out what pornography is. However, I think that sexual arousal is not the defining purpose of pornography, even though it's one of the things that comes along with it, and certainly not the universal outcome of its use. My conclusion is that pornography has more to do with cruelty than with sex, and that children's laughter at this spectacle of cruelty, and their laughter as cruelty, should concern us even more perhaps than children getting off on it sexually. This use of the video, Two Girls, One Cup, is illustrative here, where people take their reaction, video their reaction, post it online, other people watch that video and then post videos of them watching the reaction video, and on in infinite regress in that way. A parallel example, another example, apart from that I've just explained, that helps us to understand the quality and significance of the laughter at issue here is the making for use of amateur videos by young people in particular, but also older people, involving the sexual humiliation and assault of young girls, often young girls with a disability of some sort, and again posted on YouTube. This making of pornography by young people is not purposed for sexual arousal and erotic satisfaction, at least not in a simple sense. It's made for laughter. It's made to ridicule, mock and harass people. And that's the concern that I have. I think this is not in all ways a new thing. In some ways it's new, but for example, if you take the tired old joke, I only read Playboy for the interviews. If we understand magazines like Playboy and Hustler as kind of pornographic objects, seeing them as taken as a whole, we must also look at what else is in them. And one of the constant features of Playboy and Hustler in particular has been pornographic cartoons. And I think those haven't been given enough attention. Like the classic Beaver Hunter cartoon, which probably doesn't need explanation, from Hustler, or the Chester Molester cartoons in Hustler as well, or similar filler in Playboy. I think it'd be very interesting too, and I've started to write something about cartoons in pornography. Or another example is from Deep Throat, which is the classic pornographic film from many years ago, which, unbeknown to many people, is actually a comedy. It's made as a comedy with a soundtrack that is meant to emphasise when you have to laugh, and the soundtrack is sort of a series of markers about laughing at a series of events and actions which are meant to humiliate the main character, Linda Marciano, in that. So if you take away sexual arousal as a definitional marker of pornography, then you can start to look seriously about this question of laughter and cruelty. It really transforms your way of understanding pornography. Opponents of pornography, like me, are often widely characterised as persons with a prudish or Puritan or wowserish distaste for sexual arousal. I don't like sex, I mean, it's obvious. Masturbation, we don't even like nudity. In that way, when you're opposed to or have a distaste for pornography, you're widely characterised as a religious wowser, again, and people often, even if you're not religious, people say, to use a very salacious term, you're in bed with the religious in that way. A more common way to dismiss people that's really sort of coming along with these videos and this new way of thinking about pornography is exemplified in a recent article by Alan McKee, who characterised pornography as entertainment, as if to correct Puritan approaches, as if, you know, to call pornography entertainment lifts it out of the genre of sex and actually puts it out of the genre and out of the realm of critique. You can't criticise something that's entertainment after all. Everything becomes one big joke, and the problem becomes that people take it all far too seriously. So they're not only prudes, but they're serious prudes as well. However, to say that something makes us laugh is not necessarily to redeem it. My view is that we don't take pornography and many other things seriously enough, and in particular we haven't taken the question of pornographic laughter seriously enough either. If I had more time here, I'd just quickly mention an example that relates to making of pornography in, I don't want to fall into the Nazi trap, whatever it's called, Godwin's Law, but I'll talk about a little bit about the making of pornography in the camps through the making of women in pornography there. And what happens is, again, that people are, instead of getting off at this spectacle, they are mocking and laughing and deriding and humiliating people. And that's the subject matter here, rather than sexual arousal. I want to finish with a very specific conclusion, and I do have a concrete recommendation to make. I went to a seminar a couple of years ago, 2 years ago, where a researcher was presenting her findings about how high school students react to pornography. She said, and she said it with a laugh, that students found it funny. I've no doubt that they do. We have evidence of that. I'm not so sure that all of them did find it funny, or originally found it funny, but certainly there's immense pressure in our society for people not to react to pornography as if it raised serious questions or as if it were a serious matter. The comment about laughter, I think she meant to be reassuring. She meant to say, the students find it funny, they're not using it for sexual arousing. Calm down, parents. It's all a joke to them. It was also a way of saying, I think, that the students were not seeing the pornography, they were seeing through it. In other words, they had learned critique. They had learned critical studies, and they could see through the pornography. They were laughing, not masturbating in that way. I don't think it's so reassuring in that way. But I think that when we call pornographic, when we understand pornography rather, in the context of this laughter, we draw attention to the way that pornography takes delight in humiliation and finds subordination funny. In fact, perhaps the most effective form more broadly in which sexual hierarchies are policed today is pornographic laughter. And you can see that in the way that I'm no great supporter of Julia Gillard, as some people will know, but certainly I think that the conduct towards it was very much played out in this way of humiliation through pornographic laughter, cartoons, remarks and so forth. This is the stock in trade now. Pornographic laughter is the stock in trade of unapologetic discrimination. In my view, doing pornography is a practice of inequality in which women and girls lose out, and sometimes it's sexual, has a sexual kick to it, other times it's just cruel and humiliating. This pornographic laughter, also to finish, is often used against those like me who voice concerns about any kind of demeaning treatment of women or girls, whether in entertainment, advertising or political discourse. There's been a pornographisation of all of those in particular. The response to critiques of pornography and to people who are concerned about it is that pornography is all just one big joke and that women in particular need to stop taking things so seriously. That's what we teach young people, and it's one of the things that is taught by pornography. Don't take things so seriously. The self-styled humorist Ben Podgier, I'm sorry to quote this again, but wrote in the Left Wing magazine, and so this approach is bipartisan, it's not a right-wing or a left-wing approach. He wrote in the Left Wing magazine, the King's Tribune, he said, "There are many reasons a person might be weird enough to not like pornography. For example, that person may be suffering from nervous hysteria." Women always do that. Nervous hysteria. And he said, and they might just need a good finger massage or a fire hose-induced orgasm to set things right. The title of the article was "Porn, Don't Knock It Till You've Tried It." Complaints about the pornographic depiction of women become the occasion for further mocking, laughter and derision. And from my experience and from talking to young people today, this is what happens when they express concern. They're met with further laughter and derision. That images and themes drawn from pornography industry are increasingly used to belittle women and denigrate their standing through making them figures of fun and humiliation. The use of gender or racial stereotypes also is often excused in this way as a joke, giving the mistaken impression that it can't be discrimination if it's a sleazy joke. My concern here is not what pornography might cause someone to do after viewing it. I know that's a very common concern and it's a legitimate one. But my concern is with what pornography signals or tells us about ourselves. It tells us that we live in a world in which the hatred of women is still acceptable and still able to be openly spoken about and spoken for and laughed at as if it were a joke. Pornography is not a form of sexual freedom, but it's the same old subordination. And despite the sneakers of its proponents, it's actually not a laughing matter. If I have one recommendation for my research here, and I've got 2 more minutes, I'm sorry, it is to help your children to take themselves and their lives seriously. My recommendation is not about sex education, but about character education, to help your children to self-reflection and for them to value self-reflection and seriousness in others. I want to end on a slightly defensive note, which is that you might have got the impression from my talk that I'm a humorless feminist, that I'm hostile to humour and laughter. I think about how often people in their dating profiles put GSOH. You can't, a good sense of humour. You can't imagine somebody writing in their dating profile BSOH, bad sense of humour, or NSOH, no sense of humour. It's, you know, we take it for granted that good sense of humour is something that we should cultivate. And I'm not opposed to a good sense of humour. And I'm not opposed to laughter. Laughter is good. A song that I love very much sings of, shall I lie beneath the laughter of your eyes? And I think this is a very important question. But you have to understand laughter and understand where it's coming from and what it's significant. The laughter that the songwriter is talking about is very different from the laughter in these videos. It's a very different kind from the laughter that's the soundtrack of pornography. The laughter the songwriter is singing about is not incompatible with seriousness. I just wanted to finish with this last video here. This is an extract from a series of photos that I saw in the last couple of days about young Syrian girls who talked about what they dreamed for themselves and what they dreamed that they would be. And they were asked to, I don't know if anybody's seen it, they were asked to dress up. It's well worth sort of Googling and finding. They were asked to dress up as what they would be when they were older and to talk about themselves, excuse me, as if they were older. This is Fatima, who's a future police officer at 11. Fatima says, I'm a kind yet serious policewoman who's respected and a role model in the community. People are not afraid of me, but they call me when they're in trouble. I teach them how to respect and love one another. Sorry, I'm immensely moved by this. I fight for justice, I help the innocent. I was much taken by her view. I'm kind but serious. And I thought, if I asked Australian children to describe themselves in this way, not meaning to say, I want to be a policewoman, I want to be a doctor, I want to be an MTV star, which is the usual thing at my son's school, the common thing, but rather to describe what they wanted to be and then to talk about themselves as if they were already did that. Who among our Australian children would say, I'm a kind yet serious person? It's an extraordinary thing to say. yet serious in that way. And I think it's that sort of sense of seriousness, of taking yourself seriously, taking your dreams seriously, taking your thoughts, your reactions, your life, your soul seriously, that we need to teach much more even in sexuality education, so that people are able to have the resources to be able to say what does affect them and to develop their own resources for self-reflection, and which gives them the best grounding, I think, in order to stand up to people who laugh at them and who will laugh at them for their opposition to pornography. So that's my last recommendation. Be like Fatima. And as you can see, Fatima is quite joyful. She's not a joyless little Puritan in that way. And Fatima is actually seems to be having quite a good time. Of course, it's a very fearful picture because you wonder what will happen to her, but you can see that seriousness doesn't preclude a delight and a joy in life, so, which pornography does.